Hello everybody on stream, thanks for joining my talk. It's absolutely fantastic to be part of PyGovern 2023. About 23 years ago, when I started as a software engineer, there was a legend out there. A software engineer to whom we all looked up. Nowadays, he's best known for creating Trello and Stack Overflow. So maybe you can guess by now that it is Joel Spolsky. Back then, he was best known for his blog. His most famous blog post was Things You Should Never Do, Part 1. Actually, I never figured out whether there's a Part 2. Do you know? In this blog post, he named the single worst strategic mistake a software company, organization, or team or developer can do. And that is to rewrite software from scratch. But actually, that is exactly what we did. For the TOX test automation tool, a tool downloaded more than 11 million times a month, both heavily used in the open source community and by multi-billion-dollar companies alike. Today, I want to tell you the story of TOX and especially about the rewrite. You will learn about the reasons for the rewrite, the planning, the ups and downs, and how we finally released it, and most important, you will learn more about us, the maintainers. But first about me. My name is Jürgen Gmach. I'm a senior software engineer at Canonical, the company best known for creating Ubuntu. I work in the Launchpad team. We take care of the build infrastructure of Ubuntu. So anytime you do an apt install, this goes through our little machines. Please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or Mastodon. I also have a blog, but it's not as famous as Joel's. I'm one of the maintainers of TOX. I'm also a fellow of the Python Software Foundation. And I live at the outer reach of the Bavarian forest. And that's possible because of the new remote world, right? Actually, it's not really new for Canonical. We're remote first and only for 19 years. And actually, we are hiring. Both Canonical, in general, but also my team. We are looking for a couple of Python engineers, entry and mid-level positions, and a manager. So if you're interested, please reach out to me or visit my website. But now let's talk about TOX. TOX is a test automation tool. What does that even mean? In order to explain that, we need to have a look at how testing is usually done. Let's assume you need to do this manually. You need to create a virtual environment, you build the package, you install the package, you install the test dependencies, maybe PyTest and coverage, and then you run the tests. And probably more, like you need to run the linters, build documentation, and then this is only on your PC for one Python version and for one framework version. So you need to duplicate this process so many times and think about setup in CI and about your colleagues and also about external contributors. This is pretty tedious, right? So there must be a better way, right? You can use TOX. Just create a configuration file. Specify the Python versions you want to test against in the env list. Then set up the test environment. That means you define your test dependencies and the test command. And that's it. As this configuration file is checked in Git, it is available to you, your colleagues, to external contributors, and also in CI. I usually install TOX via pipx. Pipx is an awesome tool to install and run Python command line tools. You should check it out. In order to understand the rewrite, we need to understand the roots of TOX. TOX was created by Holger Krickel already back in 2010. You may not be familiar with that name. Holger not only created TOX, he created PyTest, Python's most popular test runner, DevPy, and also PyPy. Not the package in this, but the alternative Python implementation. Then some time passed, 7 years. TOX got pretty popular. Some even called it the standard in testing. And then Bernard Gabor joined. Not because he wanted to become an open source maintainer, but out of necessity. He wanted some bugs fixed and some feature requests implemented. And soon he noticed Tox was written with very specific assumptions. It is used to create a Python environment, not a Conda or a Docker environment, on your local system, to be configured via Tox INI, not via PyProject YAML or a Python file. And it's there to build source distributions and not a wheel. And it evaluates configuration eagerly at startup instead of just evaluating what is currently needed. And that could, when you have a very long configuration file, can take quite long. And this also means changes were very hard or impossible. So what do you do when you just join a new project and you're not perfectly happy with it? You rewrite it, obviously. But as you can see, it was an attempt. So it was not finished, but Bernard gained some valuable insights from this attempt. Shortly after that, Holger left the project. And you need to know this is normal, this is healthy. You don't need to stick around forever with one open source project you created. Maybe you changed company, you work on a different tech stack, or you're just not longer interested in it. That's fine. So when I tell people that I'm the maintainer of Tox, I often get asked, why did you create Tox? Why did you call it Tox? And then I have to answer, I did not create Tox. I joined much later. That's a normal process here. Soon afterwards, Bernard noticed a pattern in the bug reports for Tox. Actually, those bug reports were not really for Tox, but actually for virtualenv, which is used by Tox in order to create virtual environments in the background. At that time, virtualenv was not well maintained. Bernard fixed a couple of bugs and eventually became a maintainer of virtualenv. And what do you do when you become a maintainer of a project? You rewrite it, right? So Bernard started rewriting virtualenv. And before I answer the question how this worked out, I need to put this into perspective. Back then, I was a contributor to the SOAP framework, which is one of Python's oldest web frameworks, with more than 300 repositories, and we were about to migrate it from Python 2 to Python 3, and I was completely lost. I created lots of environments, virtual environments, moved code back and forth, ran code here and there, and then I asked the other maintainers, how do you do that? And they said, well, we just use Tox. And that is the way I learned about Tox. At that time, I was more than 10 years in the industry, and I did not know about this valuable tool. And that is why it is so important that you go and attend conferences, go to conferences and attend them, and to contribute or interact with other people in the open source field, to broaden your knowledge. So the resolution to this question, whether Bernard finished the rewrite, yes, he did it, and it was a big success. And this is even more scary, as virtualenv has like 80 million downloads a month. He also created a very good talk about it. That's listed here, and you definitely should watch it. Only a week after that, Bernard announced Tox 2nd edition rewrite on Twitter. And only a little bit later, he created the first commit. And then something very special happened. Bernard started streaming the rewrite on Twitch. I learned about that on Twitter, and I certainly joined the Twitch streams. There were not a lot of visitors, but I really enjoyed those streams. You need to imagine, back then, I was the single Python developer in my little company with not a lot of contact to the outside world. And then there was this very experienced developer live streaming the recreation of this tool I really fell in love with, and he shared his thoughts about architecture and design decisions. It was so great and I learned so many new things. And then I was really sucked into this Tox thing. After that, I started answering Tox questions on Stack Overflow. So you may wonder why I answer questions when I just started using the tool. Well, because that's the way I like to learn the ins and outs of a new tool, answering questions for other people and helping them. I also gave a talk about Tox at Python Ireland meetup. At that time, I was pretty confused how to run my linters. Do I use the CLI? Do you use the integration of VS Code? Do you use Tox, which is certainly possible? Do you use pre-commit? And what about CI? Do I have to... How does it work? It took a while. But then I came up with a great solution, which I then shared via this talk, because sharing is caring, right? So please check out this talk. And then I started contributing to discussions and GitHub issues for Tox. I was answering new questions and issues. I went through the backlog and checked whether old issues are still valid. That's also a valuable contribution to a project. You don't always have to contribute code. And then Bernard announced Tox 4 Alpha 2 on Twitter. He also asked the users to test it, as this was the very first version you could really use. So I wanted to be a good citizen and I tested my personal projects, my 10 or so work projects, and this worked out pretty well. And then I remembered, I also helped maintaining 300 SOAP repositories and they all use Tox. I thought about how could I test Tox against these 300 repositories, because I don't want to do this manually, right? So I used another tool. It's called All Repos. This is a tool to clone and manipulate repositories at scale. You can clone a complete GitHub organization. But it offered no way to run arbitrary command line tools. So I wrote a plugin to run Tox against all 300 repositories. And this worked out pretty nicely, but yeah, I did not say it was successful. Only 22% of the repositories actually worked out with Tox 4. And then I reached out to Bernard and he had the perfect answer. 22% success here is not that great news. But on the plus side, it seems if we fix SOAP, we should be in a decent place. And that's the way. You need to be optimistic. At that time, we also got some feedback on Twitter, especially as Bernard announced that the plugin system will not be backwards compatible to Tox 3. Oliver, back then also Tox maintainer, asked, are the people with the torches and the pitchforks at the gates already? And spoiler, they were not. Yet. But we come back to that later. And then something nice happened. We also got some positive feedback from Chuck, who's usually at every conference around the globe and is doing really great job for promoting Python around the world. She reported a possible bug which I could resolve, and then she said something nice. And feedback is something important, as you usually only get bug reports. Or there are people who want their 500 lines configuration file debugged. So if you use open source software, please reach out to the maintainers and say thanks or say hi. And then I created my first serious pull request. I tried to fix the bugs I reported earlier so I could give something back. And I was pretty busy doing a lot of pull requests, one after another, and So it went on for some time like that, combined with all the other things I did for Tox. And then I was announced as a Tox maintainer by Bernard. And you can imagine that was an amazing experience, because becoming the maintainer of such a vital tool in the industry, and a tool I loved. Only later I realized that means there's a lot of work for free. But that's okay. And later I created another talk about the mass testing of Tox4 against the 300 SOAP repositories at World Clone Day. And you may see a pattern. We tried to spread the word for the Tox4 rewrite to make people aware of it. As we were aware, when you do a rewrite, possibly some bad things can happen. And we wanted all users out there to test Tox4 before the release. Bernard also announced Tox4 rewrite at PyCon US via Lightning Talk. And then life happened. Imagine it's now the end of 2021. We are 1.5 years into the rewrite, and people were already pretty impatient. And then Bernard moved to the US. And you don't do that on a weekend, right? I also built a house for my family, which took about a year. And I also joined Canonical. And I certainly wanted to put in some effort to do a good job. And again, we are 1.5 years into the rewrite. And basically, we paused the rewrite now for another year. Well, we were only 2 active maintainers and we had no spare time. You can imagine that people got angry, right? And back here we go with the torches and the pitchforks. We got some feedback like this: that multi-year rewrite seems to never reach general availability. If it was a business, it would have been bankrupt one long time ago. And at first I thought, oh my God, such a... But then I thought, what if they are right? What if we are really doing something wrong? But once again, Bernard stepped in and gave a great answer. Such a major release will ultimately break a lot of people, and we, the maintainers, we need availability to help those users and address their concerns. I think that's a great answer. So it was about our users, you, and not about us, the maintainers. And then something remarkable happened, which I never experienced in my career before. We received a bug report about the vulnerability of PyLib, which is a dependency of Tox. And you need to know that only Tox3 uses PyLib, not Tox4. And we only used the vulnerability affected only the SVN module of PyLib, which we do not even use. So Tox is not really affected, right? But there are tools out there like pip audit and safety, which check your supply chain, which is a good thing. But certainly now CI is broken for lots of people out there. And there is no easy way out. We had no time to move Tox4 over the finish line. So, as a workaround, we recommended to whitelist this vulnerability. People were not super happy, but, well, there was nothing we could do. But you can imagine this was not the end. Our friends at the PyTest team also received a bug report about PyLib, as PyLib is also a dependency of PyTest. And they did something different. For the next or upcoming version, PyTest 7, they vended PyLib, or parts of PyLib. So instead of installing PyLib from PyPI, they took parts of PyLib and put that in PyTest test codebase and stripped away the parts they did not need, including the vulnerable SVN module. This worked out pretty well for PyTest. But they rendered pylib in a very special way. And now the rendered pylib shadows an installed pylib. So whenever Tox was trying to import from pylib, it did not see the installed pylib, but it tried to import from the rendered pylib. That wouldn't have been a problem, but they did not render the parts of pylib we needed. So every time Tox tried to do it, imported, there was an import error. Tox was broken whenever it was installed along PyTest, and this was a serious mess because the combination of Tox and PyTest is super widespread, but we still did not have the capacity to actively work on it. And then something beautiful happened. Sorin Spanera, a longtime friend of Tox and plugin author, announced to be able to work a full week on Tox 4. He wanted to help to move it over the finish line. At the end, maybe it was not even a full week, but it gave some momentum, and he closed a lot of bugs and created pull requests, which we then reviewed, and me and Bernard also spent some time on it. And finally, fireworks, only almost 3 years after the start, released Tox 4. What a great relief, both for us, the maintainers, and our users. Can you imagine what happened right after the release? We got lots of regressions, lots of complaints about things broken. But on the plus side, we also got contributions from more than 50 contributors, and one even became a maintainer of Tox. And we also got some praise, which is always nice. So, why did we have so many regressions? We took great care. We announced the rewrite on all channels many times. We tested Tox against hundreds and hundreds of projects, and still. Why? And the answer is, it's all about Hiram's law. And it says, with a sufficient number of users of an API, it does not matter what you promise in the contract. All observable behavior of your system will be depended on by somebody. We received bug reports for things we did not even know they were possible with Tox. But now we know. At that time, I was a little bit frustrated. We put a lot of effort into Tox, and people still got angry. Imagine, whenever I contribute to Tox, I take away time from my family and my kids. And yet people still get angry. At that time I read that blog post. I am not your supplier. And that blog post really resonated with me. I certainly do not want to break users. We do not create bugs on purpose. And I do a lot of these things in my spare time. And especially, I do not have a contract with my users. So, it's about anybody to use Tox or not. I don't want to bore you with the highlights of the release. You can check out our documentation. But when you have a close look at the list, and when you recall what Bernard identified as the issues back then, we exactly achieved what we wanted. Now we can implement whatever is necessary for the future of Tox, so we are able to more easily maintain Tox and extend it. And how was this possible? We used better abstractions. Before we had 1 to 3 files with mixed responsibilities, and now we have a config module for configuration management, an execute module for command execution, and so on. You get the idea. And this design evolved over time. It was not entirely clear from the beginning. But now it is easier to contribute to talks. Maybe also for you. Just give it a try. After the release, we sat down together and discussed how it went. So what did go well? We have a very strong automated test suite, so it did not uncover all bugs. We announced the rewrite on every possible channel. We wrote blog posts, we posted on Twitter, on a Mastodon, we gave lightning talks, we announced it on the Python forum, but don't think lots of people test free releases. No, some do. So, head tip, thanks for that. We sticked around after release to help people with the migration and assess possible regressions. We kept the old documentation, as some people pin older versions and use them for a while. And we kept the TOX3 release branch and even created another release to ease migration, although now TOX3 is no longer maintained by us. And then we thought about what we could have done better. And this looks odd or even arrogant, right? So let's rephrase it. What could we have done better given the resources we had? Nothing. We had very limited time, and I think it went pretty well. There are also some lessons learned from the rewrite or from rewriting such a big project. Have a plan. Test a lot. Be available post-release. Prepare for bug fixes in the coming months after the release. And be ready to re-evaluate everything from the ground up. And certainly be nice, but set boundaries. And cheers to you, Joel. I'm not sorry to say that legends are not always right. So thank you very much for attending my talk. Thanks to the organizers and thanks to my employer Canonical who made it possible for me to attend here. See you around. Bye bye.